would you say that they should work at other companies first before joining like a professional services company to say, hey, well, I know how to manage change? Like you had experience in
Yep.
several different companies on the
Mm-hmm.
operational role. So
Mm-hmm.
it gives you context and an understanding of like,
Yep.
what an organization is thinking. Do you think that someone could just jump straight in, or would you recommend that they go somewhere else first?
I have complete and total bias in my answer to this question, and I'm just going to say that I might need to say it in the beginning, the middle, and the end of this answer. From my experience in my career and watching the careers of a lot of other people, if you want a deep, robust knowledge of an organization, any type of organization, start there. If you want a very fast paced environment in which you're going to see bits and pieces of a lot of organizations, go into consulting, right? Because as a consultant, you're not in that one particular business all the time. You're touching several different organizations, but you're not getting to see all the way in, as deeply. If you are more interested in understanding how one organization works and getting that deep knowledge, don't go immediately into professional services or consulting. Like I said, I have so much bias there. I've spent the vast majority of my career in a professional services firm. It is very fast paced. You do get to see a lot of businesses and talk to a lot of people, but you're never going to know all of those organizations because they're not your full-time place.
All right. Hi, Amy. Thanks for joining us at the Life of a Career podcast.
Of course.
Before we get started, can you give a quick introduction of who you are and what you do?
Absolutely. I'm excited to be here. It's so nice to meet you kind of in person, Eric. I know that we've just chatted electronically, so it's nice to put your face with your name. My name is Amy Horner. I am a strategic change expert. I have worked in the space of strategic change for the past 15 years. Basically, what that means is I come in and I help people identify change initiatives that they already have. They're just not sure how to take them and move forward. So I'm a collaborative leader of strategic change, and I really enjoy it. People always have the answers. I'm just the person that kind of leads them in the direction that is best for their organization, for strategic advancement, and also to create better strategic market advantage for whatever space that they work in. So that's a little bit about me. I live in Charlotte, North Carolina. I recently moved back to Charlotte after 17 years in the DC metro area. It's incredibly nice to be back, especially we're recording this in January. So the first week of January, it's 65 degrees here. And so that was not something I experienced for the time that I spent in DC. So it's really nice to be back in Charlotte for reasons other than the weather, but you can't beat it.
Yeah, that's great. I'm actually super excited to learn more about the strategic change management career, because how do you even get into it? But I'm glad that this is the purpose of the podcast. Like we're actually going to hear your story.
Sure.
So before we get started there, even though I really want to get there,
Mm-hmm.
so I might rush you through this a little bit. Is this what you always wanted to do as a kid?
Sure. Everyone knew what a strategic change leader was when we were in fourth grade, right? That's one of those things they list: doctor, nurse, astronaut, firefighter, strategic change, strategic planning expert. Is that on the list of standard? No?
Sure.
I think, like a lot of people, I fell into it. I think that's probably the best way to put it. I was working in an organization in a highly operational role. There are two ways you can look at operations: steady state and a continuance of the way things have been built, or to adapt, hopefully strategically, to the changes in the environment, the changes in the world, the changes in the market, the changes in your employee base and the culture of your employee base, and the needs and wants of not only whomever you're serving, but the people doing the work for you. And strategy is an important way to look at things. um, I think really just to get organizations there from where they were to where they need to be. So I completely fell into it, and then I fell in love with it. It's interesting space. Not everyone loves change. I think we all can attest to that. Not everybody loves it. But I think people hate it less once they start to get into it. It's just overcoming that hump of the initial, hey, we're going to change something. You're going to be a part of it. Please stop digging your heels in. This is really important.
Hmm. Like what if it wasn't? I mean, we were just sort of joking there about what did you want to be as a kid, and of course, strategic change leadership is an option. What was it that you were thinking of doing? Maybe like around the high school period of your decision on career paths and things like that.
Yeah, I truly had no idea. So my parents are both educators. My father's a retired high school principal, and my mother was a retired early elementary special education major. And the only friends they had were teachers and educators. I just thought everyone in the world worked in a school, either as a teacher, an administrator, a counselor, a coach, or someone, cleaning up and coordinating everything. I didn't know there were careers outside of the academic world. When I got into high school, I was in an honors English class my ninth grade year, and a partner from what was then Price Waterhouse, which is now PwC, came in to speak about the daily experience, what it was like to work in Big Four public accounting, and I was sold. And so I was like, I am going to go into the Big Four. I am going to declare my major, which I did. I declared my major early to get into college. I came out and I worked for KPMG, and I thought it was going to be everything I ever wanted to be. I was going to do that for the next 40 years and things were going to be perfect. And that came to a very abrupt end. I got laid off about 6 to 8 months into the first job I'd ever had out of college. And I think it taught me a lot about resiliency and carving my own path. I did consider at that point going to teaching, right? Because I was born from all those educators. I'm glad I didn't. It's just been a really interesting turn. So that's a little bit about how I started, and how I decided to choose a career that ended up not being the career I'm in at all.
Just quickly, what was the pitch that Price Waterhouse, that guy, that person, what was their pitch that made you go, I want to be an accountant or go into accounting? That's not
I think
necessarily.
it was on he was the gentleman that came to talk to us was an audit partner. I thought it was so interesting that they went in and took a hard look at how organizations worked, making sure that organizations were doing things in an ethical manner, but really understanding the business practices of the organization. I think all of us are curious by nature. I certainly was curious as a teenager. I hope I still am today. And I really liked not only that aspect, but also the talking to multiple clients, networking with multiple people. And I was sold immediately. I took accounting classes in high school.
Oh, okay. So you already knew you had some level of interest inside of the
Mm-hmm.
accounting world.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the then how early did you have to prepare to to prepare for the big four? Because I think that there's a whole entire hiring process, right? That comes with that.
There is a hiring process, and I had a really good set of mentors in college. Two of them who were my soccer teammates at Indiana University of Pennsylvania, who were accounting majors about 2 years ahead of me. And they let me know which courses to take, which professors could help me, which organizations to be a part of, and what events to go to. So for me, that really started my sophomore year of college, making sure I knew the recruiters, taking the appropriate courses, and getting my name and my face out there. At that point, we had to print our resumes on fancy paper. That was the big thing when I was in college. You had to have the fancy, thick paper to get noticed. But having those women mentor me through that, and start that process. But you're right, it does start early. It does not start senior year of college.
Yeah, I've always heard like those big four, the big management consulting firms, like you just have to start early,
Yep.
and a lot of people don't recognize that.
Mhm.
Um, how did you find those mentors?
Yeah, so they were teammates of mine. I was fortunate enough to play college ball, and they knew I was also an accounting major. And I think one of the great things about both of them, their names are Shelly and Rachel. The great things about both of them is they didn't have someone to help them when they were sophomores. They had figured it out on their own, and they were so willing to share their knowledge with me, which in then part inspired me to turn around and share my knowledge with the next group of my teammates who came behind me. There's a really cool domino effect of people sharing knowledge and information and helping me with information that I couldn't have received elsewhere.
Oh, that's great. It was fellow students, not even like a professor or school organization leader.
No,
Okay.
no. The only advice I received from a professor at my university was she told me I should straighten my hair, and you can see how well I listened to that.
that's that's not even relevant.
I don't think it has anything to do with my capabilities as a professional, no.
Yeah. Was that like the advice back then, that or was it a whole different environment in terms of like what was being advised for,
Mhm.
women in college?
I think in order to be seen as professional, you needed to be seen as conservative. From my remembrance and just my the way I absorbed it was, having straight hair, wearing navy blue, not being too loud, not making too much noise. To be conservative was associated with being professional, and so yeah, it definitely was a piece of advice I got, and I did not listen. So I don't know what that says about me. Um,
Mentorship's a two-way street too, right? Mentees have to accept the advice.
They do, and I think it's interesting. The world changes, and that's something that I try to keep in mind when I'm mentoring other people. I just had this conversation with someone the other day, and we were talking about someone that we're jointly mentoring, and I was thinking, and I said to this other person, just because this was a good experience for us doesn't mean this is going to be a good experience for this person, and maybe we should think long and hard about what they're saying and what we're hearing from them, and not so much try to push them in the direction that was helpful for us. I don't know that the woman who told me I should straighten my hair uh, was trying to come at it from any sort of negative aspect, but she had probably been told that 20 years ahead. And so I do think from we are in a less conservative space now, and people are able to embrace who they are and bring their whole authentic everything themselves to work. And that's a huge change. That's I want to say that's probably been the biggest change I've seen throughout my career.
Hmm. Okay. So from after you were laid off
Mm-hmm.
from KPMG,
Mm-hmm.
what was what did you do next, and how did you get over getting laid off after 6 or 8 months? I mean, that had been a challenging experience as a new graduate.
It's so funny. I didn't realize people actually lost their jobs, right? I had come from this family of educators, and educators they're never without a job, right? We always have a teacher shortage. You read about that even now today on the news. So I didn't realize that you could have your job taken away from you. So that was kind of lesson number one. Lesson number two is your job doesn't define you, and it also gave me the freedom to say, do I really want to be here? Right? I'm born and raised in Pittsburgh. I got that job at KPMG Pittsburgh. I was right back where I had grown up. So, do I really want to stay here? Do I really want to stay in Pittsburgh? Or do I want to take advantage of this opportunity and move somewhere else? And at a very young age, I came down here to Charlotte. I found a recruiter. I had 3 interviews. I got 3 job offers, and I picked one, and I moved. Thankfully, my father drove the U-Haul because I probably wasn't qualified to do that at 22 years old. And really, I think that was the biggest takeaway from that is I didn't have to stay where I was. I was given the opportunity to go do something else.
What made you decide to just leave what you were familiar with?
That's a really great question. I think I didn't want to be stagnant. I didn't want to stay there. I knew you can always go home, right? We all know that saying. You can always go back and you can always go home. I wanted to try to live in a different place and experience something new. I had never lived or really been that far away from my family before. I knew probably 2 or 3 people when I moved to Charlotte the first time in my early 20s. And it was such a tremendous experience because I did have to do everything differently and new and for the first time and find my way around before there was Google Maps or any other software that was helpful for us. And so it was a great experience. It was certainly a learning experience.
Hmm.
You know, that linear career path that you wanted me to talk about. We're in that part right now.
Yeah, exactly. Just KPMG. And then what type of firm was it that you were hired into? Was it
Yeah.
still in accounting?
Yes, I stayed in accounting because it was easy for me to get a job doing what I had experience in. And so I stayed in accounting when I first moved down here. It was a regional CPA firm, and it's still mostly intact today. The firm I worked for was acquired by Grant Thornton a few years after I left, and I've had the opportunity moving back to get reacquainted with and reconnect with a lot of the people I worked with when I first moved here, which has been neat as well, to connect with people you haven't seen in 20 years.
Yeah, that's great. And then what made you leave that job? Was it for bigger opportunities, or um, was there another layoff event that was unforeseen?
There was not. You know, it's that buzzword now that we know is work-life balance. That wasn't really a buzzword back then. But I was working a lot of hours and it had a lot of pull on me. At that point, I was trying to study for the CPA exam. I was unsuccessful at it just because my career took so much precedent over my time. And there was travel involved and unpredictable schedules. And so I left so I could really focus on my own professional development, get the exam out of the way.
Got it. Okay. Did you stay in Charlotte for that change then,
I
or
did. I
okay?
did. I had the opportunity to work for a top five home builder, which I did as the assistant controller down here in Charlotte. And I ended up in DC because I received a phone call one day from the DC Metro CFO. And he said, I'd like to bring you up here to be the Virginia controller. And at that point, I was like, sure, that sounds like fun. Let's move around. Right? I had done it once. I figured I could do it again. I thought I'd be in DC for 5 years. It turned into 17. Maybe I'm not good at math. Maybe I chose the wrong profession after all. But it was a great experience. I'm glad I had the time there. But that's how I ended up where I was, and that's really what happened for me next.
Okay, so you were a controller
Mhm.
for this. It was a real estate builder, or what type of builder?
New home builder, so
Okay.
volume-based builder. It was Centex Homes. It's now part of Pulte Homes, and it
Oh yeah.
was right at the turn of the real estate boom, when homes were selling really well. I enjoyed it. That was my first turn in operations. Although I was in a finance role, it was a very operational role. And I also had the opportunity to work on a lot of strategic initiatives, IT initiatives, really taking things from DOS based systems to Windows based systems. And that was a really great opportunity and an interesting opportunity to me because I got to see a little bit more how the strategy of the business worked.
Mm, I'm beginning to see the light of how
Uh
you get
huh.
to that change management leadership
It's
role.
just as we planned, right? Just as we wrote
Yeah,
down.
yeah, yeah. Just makes sense. I mean, you arrived there, so there
Hmm.
probably was a path.
Yep.
What was that like then to be in accounting,
Hmm.
uh, sort of profession, and then having to deal with like the software side of transitioning IT from DOS to Windows based, and then probably other initiatives inside the company that you were just involved with.
Well, for me, it was a lot more fun than dealing with the numbers because it was a little bit more interesting. I got to work with people quite a bit more and really start to understand what thought leadership was, collaborative environment, taking the opinions and experience of a lot of people and using them to have the best outcome to create the best software solution. I want to say there were like four different software packages that I had the opportunity to pilot or work on the beta group with. And I thought that was just so cool, right? It's an experience that I don't think a lot of people have. It's certainly an experience not a lot of people are having today. Software now is much more already developed, big box. You can tailor it a bit to your needs. But there aren't a lot of companies now developing their own proprietary software. It's much more go out and purchase it from an expert. And it makes sense, especially with the threats that exist in the cyber world now, is you want someone who makes that their business to protect your business. But it was a really cool experience. I really enjoyed it. And that gave me the the noticeability, I guess, to get my opportunity to move up to DC. And then I did, Eric, you're gonna love this. I did what every accountant does when they get to a place they thought they were going to spend a decent amount of time, is I went into sales. I know. I know. So I'm telling you,
Okay.
my career path definitely. Anybody who's listening to this might this might be the weirdest step, but I was a controller for about a year and a half in the DC market. It was the largest market at that time that we had in the country. It was really growing quite a bit. We were helping a lot of people purchase their first home, which that tugs at your heartstrings. And I wanted to be a little bit more of a part of it, and so I left my controller position and I went into sales as a trainee, 100% commission based position, uh-huh. Working
S-
with the public,
Selling the residential
selling
properties.
selling residential properties, selling new homes. Yes. Do you
Okay.
want to take a minute? You said we could pause if we need to pause. So I mean, if you need to pause, we can do
Well,
that.
yeah, like what made you go from like a salary based, controller, which is, pretty
Hmm.
significant to going like I want to do sales.
Hmm.
Um,
I really wanted to be more involved with people purchasing their first home. So Centex at that point in time did a lot of entry level home building. So people buying their first home, achieving that American dream, and being a part of that. And I thought that was really interesting. It's an exciting and stressful and crazy time to buy your first ever home. You don't know what you're doing. And a lot of those people were my age at that point in time. I was in my late 20s, and I really, identified with them wanting to achieve that dream. And I loved being a part of it. I did that for almost 3 years.
wow. And were you with Syntax the whole
Hmm.
time to do that?
Hmm.
Basically selling the properties that they were
Really?
building.
Yep.
Okay.
Yes.
Wow. Okay. What
Yeah.
do they think that their controller's leaving their controller position to become a salesperson?
That's so funny. The gentleman who was the CFO at the time, I don't know that he was wild about the idea. I have a little bit of an inkling of a feeling that he thought I would come back. I did come back a little bit into accounting on the consulting side. But that time in sales gave me so many tools that I never would have had that now make me successful at what I want to do, right? Customer service, understanding that deadlines can be outside of your control, knowing that you might not be at fault for something, but someone's going to yell at you anyway, right? You might be in the face a lot of that. Having to really, really work for your paycheck. If you don't sell something, you don't get paid, right? There's an interesting motivation that comes with that. And at the same point in time, helping people achieve a dream that has been so important to them. And so that was a lot of balance that I learned. Um, and then when the time was right, when the universe thought the time was right for me to be done with that and get back into, my degreed career, my business career, the market bottomed out. Hello, 2008, 2009, and gave me the opportunity when people were no longer buying homes to sit down and think, all right, what do I want to do next? Do I want to stay in a sales role, or do I want to return to where I was? And ultimately, I chose to not fully return to where I was, but to get back into the business side of corporation.
Okay. And then how was that period? How long did you do that for?
So I went into consulting, and I worked for a professional services firm that provided accounting and other services to nonprofits and small businesses. That gave me the opportunity to use everything I had learned. I was still in sales, I was still providing customer service, I still had a business development goal, but I had the opportunity to use my business degree, my accounting degree, to help those organizations with their strategy, with their operations, to move forward in an outsourced capacity. So that you can start to see like how all of these pieces came together and gave me the career path that I've been in for the last 14 years.
Okay. So this is where it's the change management
Hmm.
leadership
Hmm.
role.
This is where all the pieces that happened in my early career actually came together and gave me the basis to be able to do what it is that I do now.
Okay. Cool. So what is it? I'm glad we've arrived there because
Thank goodness.
what is a day to day or a week to week
Hmm.
like to you know develop that business, the clients, get the clients, and then also to help the clients. Like what is that like? I guess day to day, week to week, maybe
For
even
the,
like
for that
quarter by quarter.
Yeah, for that particular piece of it, it's really making sure that you understand what a client needs or a prospective client needs and what they're facing, right? That's the external piece of it, is making sure that you can match up the people that work for you, your professionals, their skill set with what the client needs, and what can move the client forward and put them in the best position to operate to their mission. So that's the client facing side of it. To grow the firm and the inside, the internal side of that is making sure that the organization and the leadership in the organization is prepared to take advantage either of an opportunity that you have in the market or to address a problem that you see out there in the market. So an opportunity that we've seen recently that everybody's really familiar with is the blast radius, I guess, if you will, of COVID, right? So COVID came in, it sent a lot of people home, and it put a lot of people in a hybrid or work from home environment that had never worked there before. A lot of executives, we've all read this and heard this, and maybe some of us have experienced this. A lot of executives pre COVID wanted to see either their people or their consultants physically in their office all the time. There are still some organizations that work like that or have gone back to working like that. But for the most part, it created an advantage or an opportunity for a lot of people to expand their footprint, their geographic footprint, either in client service or the people that they hire. So making sure that organizations were ready to take advantage of that, if that was an advantage that they wanted to take for their organization to strengthen their organization. For some people, the exact same thing was seen as a threat, right? Now, all of a sudden, their people no longer had to live there. They could go somewhere else, right? So, how do you capture the threat side of that that's going on to the organization? And then you had some organizations that experienced a little bit of both. And so, kind of, in the strategic role is taking something that's happening or could be happening and making sure that people are developing a strategy to move forward through it.
Mm. So your engagements is initially an analysis of what they're looking for, or and then providing recommendations. Is there implementation
Yeah, so
or
that's the process that's known as consultative selling, right? Understanding what is challenging someone and then putting together a solution to be able to move them forward. So that's a big part of it. Listening to what people aren't saying. I think that's a huge part of helping people identify the the sticking point, if you will, and what they need to focus on to move forward.
Mhm. During this process, are you going out and how does business development work? Is it cold calling? Is it a lot of inbound because it's an established professional services
Mhm.
company? Is it just sort of fielding requests and inquiries, or
So a
how does
lot of
that work?
times it's referral based. Someone will talk to another professional in the field, they'll talk to their auditor, they'll talk to someone in their membership organization and say, "Hey, I'm really looking to tackle this problem. Do you know someone who can help me?" Those are the majority of the people that reach out and say, "I'm not sure what it is I need, but someone told me I need to talk to you." And that's typically how the conversation starts.
And and usually when they're referring or getting referred, are they getting referred by like, hey, you need to talk to Amy Horner of this professional service company, or do they usually get referred like, hey, you have to go talk to this professional services company, and then it
Mhm.
comes down to you?
Typically, I would say the vast majority of the people I talk to, they're coming to me. I do a lot of networking events. I do a decent amount of public speaking, a fairly heavy presence on social media platforms. And so a lot of times the people are coming to me. We do have a really, a really nice digital marketing focus where people will come in, sometimes through the web or if they're out there searching for something. But the vast majority of the referrals are personal referrals from people that we know or that I know.
How did you build up that network? Because I think that's a crucial part of your business is since it's all coming in through referrals to you
Mhm.
specifically and not just the company. Like, what how did you get that started first, and then how do you maintain it?
Right. Well, I think you get it started through hard work and gaining a reputation. If people know that they can trust you and they trust the work that you can do, then they're comfortable referring you to someone else. Or if it's an existing client, they're comfortable expanding the scope and giving you a little bit more of what it is that they need to have done. I think after you establish that, it's really thought leadership and staying ahead of, or at least in tempo with the wave of the changes that are happening in the world around you, so that people continue to trust you and continue to want to work with you, and to continue to think you do good work.
The thought leadership side, is that something that you're out there just researching all the time as well, and building yourself up?
I think it's interesting. Thought leadership. I mean, I spent a lot of time on LinkedIn. It's how you and I met, of course. It is how I've met some other people that I learn a lot from. One of my reasons for sharing what I do share on LinkedIn is I've had an interesting career, right? I have an interesting set of experiences. And if I can share that with other people and they can benefit from it, why should I keep that to myself? That seems a little bit selfish to me. And so I do share that content out there. I share a lot of content on goal setting. I do share content, of course, on mentorship and strategic change. And those are really the three places that I like to share, because I feel like if 20 years ago someone had shared those things with me, I would have benefited from it greatly. I've learned a lot of things the hard way. Maybe I've learned some things twice the hard way, right? Sometimes we don't always learn the important lesson the first time. And so through thought leadership, I have learned so much from others, but I also want to be able to pass that along, so that others can potentially learn from me.
That makes sense. Um, and are you like, how do you balance the doing the work and then
Mhm.
all the social media stuff, because that's a lot of time and effort as well. Like, do you end up having work life balance, I guess? Because that was something you were walking away to do the CPA with. Like, now are you sort of returning to a place where it's like, oh, we're there, it's a lot more work maybe.
Mhm.
um yeah, I guess I'm just trying to understand the dynamics.
Yeah, I think when it's something that you really love and you enjoy, it doesn't become work. So I can talk about goal setting, like I can teach an entire goal setting class without having to refer to a set of notes. I've taught it that many times. I've worked in that space for such a long period of time. I've helped other people do that. And so I think when it's a topic that you really know, whether or not it's the topic you're being paid to do, that's your thought leadership. And so it's easy for me to talk about goal setting, or strategic change without it necessarily being the work. I think that at this point, there's a lot of what I do in my personal life that mirrors my work life, and a lot of what I do in my work life that mirrors my personal life, right? In the middle of working on my doctorate in business administration, my focus is on strategic change. So a lot of what I do professionally and a lot of what I do personally and a lot of what I do in my academics overlap. And so for me, I can create that balance because there's so much synergy in there. It's not like by day I'm a baker and then I have to go teach a class on strategic change and then later I have to go do something completely different. but a lot of what I do and a lot of who I am has synergies across all those pieces.
How did you develop that? Was it just you gravitated towards it because it became a really big interest of yours?
Mhm.
Because you even mentioned like you do speaking engagements
Mhm.
and those types of things. Like, how did you get to that point where you're like, this is what I really like doing, and I just want to go out there and tell everyone about it and help people. Like, how did you get to that spot, especially coming from where you were in accounting and then being a salesperson and ultimately getting here?
I think there's such a need for it, and I really enjoyed working with people to fill that need. Like we said earlier, people don't like change. I've found that a lot of the people who don't like change don't like it because someone has told them they're not supposed to like it. And they believed that, and they really kind of sat in that and let it root. We deal with change all the time. And some of us actually do manufacture change more regularly than others. Lots of people moved during the pandemic of their own accord. They manufactured their own change. But if their organization comes to them and says, "Oh, instead of working from 8:30 to 5:30, I want you to work from 8 to 5," those same people are probably not happy about it, right? They don't want to change, even though that change might not be huge or detrimental to what they have going on. So I think making sure that people understand you do this all the time. You're going to be a part of what is the strategy for this organization. We want you to be a part of it. We'd like to hear your thoughts. Uh, there isn't one person I've ever met that if you say, "How could you innovate and do your job a little bit differently so that it would be better?" can't answer that question. Everybody can answer that question. And so I think it's just packaging all of that together, putting those people in a collaborative, open environment where they can speak freely and keeping them on task, keeping them organized to develop a plan, and then making sure that they're part of the implementation of that plan. That's a lot of what I do. That's where I really, the best way I like to describe it. Um, and the best way to overcome that, "Oh no, I'm digging my heels in, I don't want to change," is to help people understand, like, you do this all the time. You change all the time. And now you just have to be a part of a larger organizational change. Um, I like it a lot. It's energizing, and I think it's interesting.
It's so fascinating to realize that change is a is an industry that it
Yes,
could become an industry.
it's not a dirty word. It's not a bad word.
Yeah. Huh. Interesting. I it's interesting that you sort of fell upon it too,
Hmm.
right? It was transitioning from basically real estate sales into it. Um, how were you able to communicate those skills that you had, from sales to the like to get this role?
That's a really good question. I would have to think. I would have to think about it. Like, how did I get here? I feel like I know definitively how I got to so many other stops in my career. I'm not sure I remember the exact moment of how I got here. My instinctual answer to that question is it was small pivots, several small pivots that landed me in a place of strategic change. That put me here as a consultative advisor to people who are looking for strategic change, and to make change a little bit less scary. I think that takes all facets, right? It takes the understanding the business and the finance piece. It takes the operational piece. It takes the sales piece, to turn that into strategy. I would really have to think about it, Eric. You've given me something to think about. I don't know if I could tell you the exact moment that I got here.
I, I like that response. The incremental changes sometimes you don't even notice, right?
Hmm.
It wasn't planned, right? That was just sort of happened from finance in a way to all the way to change management.
Yeah. Well, and like I said, and like we joked about, maybe one day in elementary school, strategic change professional really will be on that list of things that little kids are geared towards being. We don't all have to fly to the moon, but we can all do something pretty cool.
Yeah, maybe. I'm sure that there's a lot of change coming up soon with the advent of lots of new technologies.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah, and
so
technology is a huge catalyst for change, right? It's both an opportunity and a threat to a lot of organizations. You and I are on a completely different platform than what I'm accustomed to today. Before we started, you told me all the benefits and the reason that you had selected this platform and why it was different. And it's probably going to create either an opportunity for other platforms to take on some of these bells and whistles that they don't have, or to potentially lose market share because they don't have them, right? So technology is a huge catalyst for change.
mm. Since change is all of your business, what recommendations might you have for like a student who's interested maybe in getting into your career?
Mhm.
Is there a direct path into change management? First, I guess that would be a question I have. Is there a direct path? Like, can you graduate college, get into this world right away?
Well, I believe that there are some colleges that have innovation and entrepreneurship degrees. My instinct would that would be the closest to it, right? I don't know that there are necessarily business operations type degrees. I think a lot of people come into that through CFO work, through accounting. A lot of times the accounting team has oversight into operations, and is also the person or the people who report the financial outcomes that everyone is looking at them like we always want better financial outcomes, right? Find me a CFO that says, oh, they were happy with everything I had to report, and I'll find you someone that either wasn't listening or wasn't listening. So I think a lot of the strategy and the strategic change, kind of the formation of it, early 20s, right after college, is probably going to be either in entrepreneurship and innovation, or coming through business management and accounting.
That's yeah. I never made the tie. I probably should make the tie of like finance and accounting as sort of foundational to operations.
Mm-hmm.
Um, could you kind of explain a little bit why that is?
Well, I think it's really seen as the backbone and the basis for the business. I've said a lot of times to a lot of people, the oak tree will only grow as strong and as tall as the root system allows. And that root system is operations, it's finance and administration, it's human resources, and it's information technology. And so all of those pieces really are the root system of any organization. That's what allows the trunk and the leaves and the branches to be as big as they're going to be, and that's your client service, your product development, your sales team, whoever is forward facing, regardless of what type of business you are running. There's a forward facing piece, and then there's a piece that's holding all of that up and allowing it to successfully do whatever it is it needs to be doing. And so all of those pieces need to be understood, right? Everything, all those underground root pieces need to be understood. They need to work together in harmony. There can't be any miscommunication in between those pieces because they are so intertwined in making sure that the organization is successful.
Got it. Would you recommend people to go into the field of finance and accounting then, if they had an interest
Of
in going
course,
down
I
that?
of course I would. It's interesting. I've heard a lot of people say that they feel like they can run a business without understanding the financial piece of it. I'm sure for some people that's true, but how do you know how well your business is doing if you can't read your financials or interpret your financials in a manner where you can say, okay, yes, good, no, bad. And so I really do advocate for people at least taking a look at a few accounting and finance classes, making sure that business management is a solid piece of what they have if they want to come out into the business world. Even marketing majors, understanding the budget that they're going to be given to achieve what they're going to achieve. Everyone should have a good working knowledge of accounting and finance.
Okay. Would you say that they should work at other companies first before joining like a professional services company to say, hey, well, I know how to manage change? Like you had experience in
Yep.
several different companies on the
Mm-hmm.
operational role, so it
Mm-hmm.
gives you context and an understanding of like
Yep.
what an organization is thinking. Do you think that someone could just jump straight in, or would you recommend that they go somewhere else first?
I have complete and total bias in my answer to this question, and I'm just going to say that I might need to say it in the beginning, the middle, and the end of this answer. From my experience in my career and watching the careers of a lot of other people, if you want a deep, robust knowledge of an organization, any type of organization, start there. If you want a very fast paced environment in which you're going to see bits and pieces of a lot of organizations, go into consulting, right? Because as a consultant, you're not in that one particular business all the time. You're touching several different organizations, but you're not getting to see all the way in, as deeply. If you are more interested in understanding how one organization works and getting that deep knowledge, don't go immediately into professional services or consulting. Like I said, I have so much bias there. I've spent the vast majority of my career in a professional services firm. It is very fast paced. You do get to see a lot of businesses and talk to a lot of people, but you're never going to know all of those organizations because they're not your full-time place.
Got it. Okay. Is it possible? So that was sort of me trying to gauge, could a student get into the path as quickly as possible? The second half of I guess transitioners, like people who are in other careers mid-career, is
Mm-hmm.
it possible to transition into change management? And what type of roles, like historical roles, maybe in their professional career history,
Mm-hmm.
would translate well into uh, change management?
So I think it depends on the person, right? You have to be able to accept rejection as well as listen to others. Um, if you're accustomed to following a pattern, you need to throw that out. Change is unpredictable, not only because you're adapting to the outside world, but you're also working with people, right? If there's any piece of our jobs that are unpredictable, it's personnel management. And there's just a lot that goes into that. I think if a person is working for one organization and change leadership is something that they want to get into, they can start within their own organization. Like I said earlier, I've never met someone that, if asked, how could you innovate and do a piece of your job or your entire job differently, can't answer that question, right? Because once you get into the role, you know it, and you also know how to maybe do it a little bit better or differently or more efficient or faster or whatever the different is, whatever the differentiator is. And so I would say, we can all be change leaders. Some of us have more autonomy, of course, than others, but everybody can work in change leadership.
Okay. What, I guess, like, what is the first step if they wanted to change, go, oh, okay. You did say work in your own company and trying
Mhm.
to do change leadership there. And
Yeah,
then maybe they could transition into
sure.
a professional services company then? Is
Well, I
that what
think
you're saying?
starting with your own organization, who find the decision maker, right? Is it the head of your department? Is it the person that person reports to? Find the decision maker. Just, what is the change? Describe the change. Describe the benefits of the change, right? Get your value proposition. This is entrepreneurship and innovation 101, right? And put those pitches together. Be prepared to answer questions. Have confidence, and really believe in the change that you're recommending. And like I said, and anybody could start there. The transition from single industry into professional services is challenging because you do need to potentially report to three different or five different people, right? Depending on how many clients you have. Whereas many people, when they work in traditional industry, just reporting to one person. You have multiple dates and deadlines. You may have multiple year ends or project ends. So it is juggling a lot of parts and pieces. The people that I have seen most successfully transition from single industry into consulting have been organized, have been curious, have been willing to kind of accept a crazier pace, um, and also to be able to say no. As much as we would love to, you can't say yes to every single client, but to know how to do that in a professional manner. That those are the keys for people that I've seen successfully transition into professional services.
Okay. And then
You
just
want
because I
are
know,
you coming on board? Do you want to come on over to the dark side?
sure. I mean, my life as an entrepreneur is so hectic that I think that working in in professional services industry sounds great because then I'm not having to chase after
Well,
clients
you
every
can be
day,
an
right?
intrapreneur, right? Is an intrapreneur the new buzzword? As someone described me as that the other day, and I was like, that's a really interesting term. I'm going to have to think about that.
Yeah, the entrepreneur. There's a concept here. I guess we'll share a little bit on this podcast. The entrepreneur that is great when you're trying to scale a business.
Hmm.
You can't have a pure entrepreneur take on those roles and scaling divisions because
Hmm.
they'll go off the core, right? I think
Hmm.
a lot of entrepreneurs, if they're just a purist, like they can't be controlled a lot of times. So the entrepreneur is they still can be rooted in the foundational basis of whatever the company is doing, and then but still being able to go, okay, this is the mission, but I can help align it with something else. So I think it's different mindsets.
It is a little bit of a different mindset. However, I will say where these two concepts or titles are aligned is there's no execution, right? It's the ideas, it's the collaboration, it's the sales, it's the listening, but the execution belongs to people who are going to make the plan, have the detail orientation, test things, right? Go through a quality assurance process. And those people are critically important to any of these roles because otherwise, like you said, you're just going to start running rickshaw all over the place, and it'd be a little crazy.
Yeah. And so, just because I know you mentioned a lot about mentorship,
Hmm.
uh, could you just talk a little bit about that? Like, what do you do? Like, what's your approach to mentorship? What should a mentee expect in a mentorship mentee relationship?
Sure.
Could you just kind of touch a little bit on that?
Sure, I can definitely say that to answer the second question first, what a mentee should expect in a mentor-mentee relationship is that it's tailorable, and that whomever a mentee approaches with the request to be their mentor, the mentee should be driving that relationship. You as a mentee or me as a mentee, I'm going to someone else to ask for their time, their expertise, their advice, right? This is not your supervisor who's telling you what to do or giving you assignments or reviewing your work or giving you your annual review. This is someone who you're looking towards to say, I am here, wherever here is, I want to get there, whatever there is. Can you work with me? Can you advise me? Can you help me? What do you know or what have you experienced that is going to help me get from here to there? And so that's the first piece is what the mentor needs to understand is they are the driver of this relationship. This isn't your supervisor who drives the relationship down. This is a mentor who, yes, has more experience than you and is more likely ranked above you, even if they are or are not in your organization. But you, as the mentee, need to drive that. And so I think that's the first set of expectations, and that's honestly where I see a lot of mentor-mentee relationships fail is either the mentee doesn't understand or doesn't have the self confidence to be in charge of the relationship, or the mentor is just so used to telling people what to do that they drive the relationship. And then the mentee isn't happy because it's not what they need, it's not their goals, it's not their future, it's this person designing that for them. And so I would say that's the very first step. Um, for me as a mentor, I mentor a lot of people. The vast majority of the people I mentor are women. I think a lot of women are looking to women who have come through a professional career, maybe one that's not quite as linear as we're sold on when we're younger, and saying, how did you get there? A lot like the questions that you've asked me today, and I've tried my best to answer, like, how did you get to where you are? There is no path for this, right? There is no 5-year plan to go from accounting in the big four to controllership of a home builder to sales to strategic change, right? That's there's no career path for that. If there was, I nailed it, right? 100% on that test score. But as a mentor, just really making sure that I bring all my experience with me, that I listen, and that I don't say, okay, here's what's worked for me, and so therefore you should do this. That's, in my opinion, the last thing you want to do. Much like strategic change, and the people who are working in the organization, the mentee knows what they need to do and they know what they want to do. They really just need someone to coach them and encourage them to get those ideas out of their head and to put them into a plan so that they can move forward.
Hmm.
So
I've
true to
never.
form, I didn't listen. I answered your questions in a reverse order, but
No, that's it's great. I actually really uh, I took a lot from that because it's the first time I've heard it that way, where the mentee should drive this relationship.
mhm.
Yeah, so I'm really glad you kind of described that. How does that get established? Is that something that the mentee should probably talk to the mentor when they first ask, like, "Hey, I'd like to drive this." Really, like how
Yes.
does that get approached
Yes.
without the mentor getting
You're testing
offended?
my memory on this. I wrote an article on this last year, and I'll have to find it and share it with you. I believe it's actually in my articles on LinkedIn under Horner's Corner, but I will find it and I will send it over to you. A lot of it is identifying like what you want, right? So, like I said, you're here as the mentee. You want to get there, whatever there is, and find someone who can help you get there. Like if you are a chef and you're a professional chef and you want to go from being a sous chef to an executive chef, I'm not your mentor. Right, right. But if you're a woman who's in the middle of management in her career and you want to become a director, or if you're a director and you want to move into the C suite, I would probably be a good mentor for you. So I think making sure that you have the right person who has had a similar path, right? Kind of the if you can see it, you can be it type mentality, or buzzword. So finding the right person, identifying that person, approaching that person, right? Here, we're back to the value prop and the sales pitch, right? Saying, I really need your help. Can you help me? And that person, you might need to be prepared for that person to say no, right? That person might have too much going on. They might have several other people they're working with, and they honestly might not have the time or the energy to work with you. And so you do need to be prepared potentially for rejection. And then you need to be prepared to say, here's what I want your help with. So I'm not just going to ring your doorbell and say, hey, will you be my mentor? I'm going to approach you and say, here's where I am. Here's where I want to be in XYZ period. Here's how I think you can help me. What do you think? And you get a much different answer, I feel like, if you do it that way.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I'm excited to read that article
Thank you.
that you wrote because the approach I think is I like to get into the details of like what is that what does that ask look like, right?
Hmm.
Like that's because I think that's where most people get hung up is how do I do this? Like if I approach someone, do I just say, "Will you be my mentor?" Like what are the details? Like what are the steps? And I think that would be really helpful. And I'm glad you detailed a little bit of it of
Hmm.
how to do it, which is the mentee already has this idea of like where do I want to go? I just need help, and
Yep.
then sort of structuring it that way. So really appreciate that. Um, Before we close this out, is there anything else that you would like to impart to our audience, whether it's just life in general or or career specific? It doesn't matter.
Oh my goodness, you're giving me an open floor and an open mic because this is so dangerous for all of us. I think, if we're really going to focus on anything that I've learned that I'd like to pass on to other people, I think there's really a handful of lessons. Do find yourself a mentor, right? You don't always have to take their advice, but having someone who can say, did you think about something this way versus did you think about it that way? it helps you take a step back from what it is that you want to do. Some of us are driving so hard in the direction we want to go that taking that step back is physically or metaphorically absolutely impossible. But a mentor can help you do that. So that would be career advice number one. Career advice number two is be flexible and understand that things are going to come at you. No one has a linear career. No one is doing at 40 or 50 or 60 what they thought they were going to be doing at 25. It will be a basis for what you're doing, but it's not going to be exactly how you thought it was going to be. Make sure you're rolling with those punches. That's career advice number two. And then the last one, I think, for me, this is the most important one, is ensuring that you have the perspective to understand that your career doesn't define you, your job doesn't define you, your paycheck doesn't define you, right? I think a lot of people learned this lesson throughout pandemic. Like we talked about, pandemic brought a lot of change to our world and our lives, but making sure that you understand that perspective, there's so much more going on around you, and don't tie all of it to your title or your career or your company. Of course, those things are important. You need to work hard for the people that pay you, even as an entrepreneur, if that person is yourself. But just making sure you have that perspective. There's so much more to life than what you're doing on a 9 to 5 basis, and giving that equal importance to what you have going on as your career.
Mm. Man, that I have more questions now, but especially but we'll end it here. Maybe I'll follow up in a different one later. So if they have any questions, I guess just like me, if I have follow-ups now, how could they reach you if they're interested in asking you some questions?
I think the easiest way to reach me is through LinkedIn. You can find me at LinkedIn. My profile is, the forward slash, is it forward slash or backslash? I can never remember. It's Amy Horner, all one word, AMYHORNER. So I'm the first Amy Horner to claim my name on the platform. You can find me, I think one of my things I talk about is probably strategic change or mentorship. So if they're having trouble finding me, they can always put in those hashtags. I do have an active blog up on LinkedIn called Horner's Corner. Would love for people to subscribe to that. And then you can find me also by my hashtag, which is Welcome to Horner's Corner, where we talk about things at the intersection of mentorship and strategic change. So that is the vast majority of the content I put out there. And that's a lot of what I spend time talking to people about.
Great. And Horner's Corner, that's a hashtag on LinkedIn, or is it all over social?
Welcome to Horner's Corner is a hashtag on LinkedIn. If I expand beyond the platform, if I end up on TikTok, I will certainly let you know, right? You're in the TikTok generation.
Great. Yeah, thank you so much, Amy, for taking the time and providing so much insight into your career and also just mentorship in general. I think that was extremely helpful in how we might be able to approach someone to actually ask for help, because I think that's something that's also missing, which I never thought about until you brought up. So appreciate all your time. Sure. Thank you for joining us at the Life of a Career podcast.
Thank you so much. Everybody have a great 2023.
Hey, thanks for joining us at Mentor Access. If you like what you just watched, please click like and subscribe, and also hit that bell so that you get notified when we have new videos come out. Thank you for supporting our mission.